Welcome to Mr. Phantom Channel, a place where spiritual mysteries and ghostly stories are unveiled. This is not for the faint of heart, but a doorway into another realm, a world where the shadows murmur the truth. If you're a fan of spine-chilling tales and the supernatural, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting explorations. Get ready. The darkness holds secrets waiting to be discovered. The Haunted Apartment. My name is Oliver Murphy, and I lived in Dublin, Ireland, back in the 1990s. When I was a teenager, my family resided in an old apartment complex in the northern suburbs of the city. This complex had been around since the 19th century, originally built to house railway workers but later converted into rental apartments. My grandmother, Mary Murphy, lived alone in apartment 2874, right above the unit where my family stayed. Apartment 2868. She had been living by herself for as long as I could remember, a strong and independent woman. However, there was one peculiar thing about her apartment, the wardrobe in the hallway leading to her bedroom. She often told my mother about strange noises emanating from the wardrobe, sometimes faint whispers, other times loud thumps. Every month, she would ask my mother to check the wardrobe. Without fail, the contents of the wardrobe would always be in disarray, clothes strewn around, boxes opened, and items scattered. While my grandmother was deeply unsettled, my mother dismissed it as trivial, blaming it on rats or some other mundane cause. One day, my mother was busy and asked me to check the wardrobe for my grandmother. At that time, I was about 13 years old, curious enough to agree, though I couldn't shake off a sense of unease. When I entered my grandmother's apartment, a strange chill greeted me. It was subtle yet unsettling. I opened the wardrobe and froze. Inside, the clothes were in complete disarray. Boxes were overturned, their contents spilled out, and there was a musty, damp smell wafting from inside. I asked my grandmother if this happened frequently. She nodded solemnly, saying it had been occurring every month for over 20 years. I cleaned up the mess, trying not to think too much about it, and went back to our apartment. But I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. 2 years later, tragedy struck our family when my mother passed away in a car accident. To save money and have someone to care for her, my grandmother decided to move downstairs to live with my father and me. As we were moving her belongings, my father asked me to fetch some documents from her old bedroom upstairs. Reluctantly, I went up to the apartment. As I passed the wardrobe, I heard loud banging noises from inside. It sounded like someone was desperately trying to break free. I froze in place, my heart pounding, summoning every ounce of courage. I hurried past the wardrobe and into the bedroom. Just as I entered, the bedroom door slammed shut behind me. I ran to open it, but it wouldn't budge, as if someone was holding it shut from the other side. Panicking, I kicked the door until it finally gave way. I bolted out of the apartment as fast as I could. As I passed the wardrobe, the banging grew louder, and the entire apartment seemed to tremble as if it were about to collapse. I raced downstairs, threw the keys to my father, and shouted, "You go get it yourself." From that day onward, I never stepped foot in that apartment again. When my grandmother moved in with us, strange phenomena began occurring in our apartment. First, it was small, easily dismissed, sounds of faint footsteps at night, items slightly out of place. But over time, these occurrences became more sinister. One night, I woke up feeling like someone was standing next to my bed. When I opened my eyes, I saw a dark silhouette in the corner of my room. I switched on the light, but the shadow disappeared instantly, leaving an eerie chill in its wake. Another time, I was working on my homework in the living room when the wardrobe door creaked open. The sound startled me, and I turned to see the door wide open. The inside looked normal, but the air around it felt heavy and cold. The strange occurrences escalated, making it impossible for us to ignore them any longer. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard faint whispers coming from the direction of the living room wardrobe. First, I thought it was my imagination, but the whispers grew louder. It wasn't a single voice. It sounded like a hushed conversation between multiple people. I woke my father, and together we went to check. But as soon as we entered the living room, the whispers stopped. My father dismissed it as noise from a neighboring apartment. But I knew better. The voices were real. One morning, while taking a shower, I felt a sudden chill, as if someone were standing behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. When I looked at the bathroom mirror, I noticed a faint handprint on the fogged-up glass. I quickly left the bathroom, trembling, and told my grandmother. She went pale but didn't say much, only muttering a prayer under her breath. The most terrifying event happened on a stormy night. I woke up to the sound of loud banging coming from the living room. I rushed out to find the wardrobe door wide open. In the dim light from a nearby lamp, I saw a figure standing inside. It was a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes staring directly at me. I screamed, waking my father and grandmother. They rushed out to find me frozen in fear. My father slammed the wardrobe shut and placed a crucifix on top of it. One day, my grandmother finally shared the truth about her old apartment. She revealed that the previous tenant, a man named Patrick Flynn, had mysteriously disappeared years ago. Rumors suggested that he had been murdered and his body hidden somewhere in the building. Hearing this, I was filled with dread. Could the restless spirit of Patrick Flynn be the source of all these disturbances? Desperate for answers, we contacted a local priest to bless our home. During the ritual, the priest said he sensed a lingering spirit tied to unresolved trauma. He performed a cleansing ceremony and advised us to avoid the old apartment forever. Although the priest's blessing brought some peace to our home, the memories of those terrifying events stayed with me. Occasionally, I still dream of that wardrobe, its doors creaking open to reveal the shadowy figure within. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that some secrets are better left buried. The shadow behind the window. My name is Emma Callahan, and my family, consisting of my husband James, our 8-year-old son Ethan, and our 2-year-old daughter Lila, moved into this apartment in Seattle, Washington, at the end of November last year. The apartment was located in an old complex built in the 1950s. Initially, we were excited about our new home. It was spacious, airy, and within our budget. However, that excitement didn't last long. From the very first night, I noticed something strange. Our bedroom window, which faced the street, seemed to cast peculiar shadows when the lights were off. As I lay in bed, trying to fall asleep, I noticed a large, dark shadow moving slowly across the window. My heart raced, but I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light or the trees swaying outside. I pulled the curtain aside to check, but there was nothing there. A few nights later, Ethan burst into our bedroom, his face pale with fear. He insisted that there was someone standing outside his bedroom window. I reassured him that we lived on the second floor and no one could possibly be there. But the terror in his eyes made me uneasy. I went to check Ethan's room, pulling back the curtain to inspect the window. The street outside was silent, and nothing seemed out of place. But as my flashlight swept across the glass, an icy chill ran down my spine. The window itself was normal, yet the air around it felt unnaturally cold. About a month later, James offered to switch sides of the bed with me so he could sleep closer to the window. The next morning, he woke up and called me into the bathroom, his voice tinged with panic. On his thigh was a long, thin scratch, as if made by something sharp. The wound wasn't bleeding much, but it was deep enough to leave a mark. James swore he had no idea how it happened. That same evening, while I was out late at the nail salon, James told me something unsettling. While I was gone, Lila had pointed at the same bedroom window and kept saying, "Mama, Mama," as if calling for me. James tried to comfort her, but she wouldn't stop pointing, her small face serious and intent. That was the breaking point for me. I decided to confront whatever was causing these disturbances. Standing by the bedroom window, I began to pray. As a Christian, I firmly believed in the power of faith to protect my family. I loudly commanded any presence to leave, invoking the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I repeated the prayer several times, feeling a sense of resolve as the oppressive atmosphere around the window seemed to dissipate. For the next few nights, we experienced a strange calm. The shadow didn't return, and the air near the window no longer felt heavy. I thought we had finally rid ourselves of whatever was haunting our home, but I was wrong. One morning, while tidying Ethan's room, I noticed something odd on the ceiling. Dark handprints, small and faint, stretched from the balcony toward the area above Ethan's bed. The prints were scattered and uneven, almost as if someone had climbed across the ceiling with great difficulty. I called James to look, and he was equally baffled. Neither of us could explain how they got there. I tried to wipe the marks off with a damp cloth, but they wouldn't fade. The more I stared at them, the more uneasy I felt, especially when I noticed the prints seemed to lead toward Lila's room. After discovering the handprints, strange noises began echoing through the apartment. At night, I would hear faint knocking at the front door. When I went to check, no one was there. Another time, while we were having dinner, we heard the distinct sound of footsteps above us. But our apartment was directly below the roof. There was no one upstairs. One particularly eerie night, I heard a soft whispering sound coming from Lila's room. I tiptoed in to find her sitting upright in bed, staring at the dark corner of the room. "Lila, what's wrong?" I asked gently. She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the empty space. My heart raced as I scooped her up and carried her into our bedroom, determined to find answers. I spoke to one of our elderly neighbors, who had lived in the complex for decades. She told me about a chilling incident from the 1970s. A young woman had been murdered in apartment 206, our unit. The woman had tried to escape her attacker by climbing onto the balcony but failed. Her body was discovered days later. The neighbor explained that, since then, residents of apartment 206 often reported strange occurrences, unexplained noises, cold spots, and fleeting shadows. Hearing this, I felt a deep dread settle in my chest. Could the woman's restless spirit still linger here? James and I decided to seek help from a local priest. During the cleansing ritual, the priest said he felt a lingering presence in the apartment, one tied to unresolved trauma. He performed prayers and blessed every room, placing a crucifix in each one for protection. After the ritual, the eerie atmosphere in the apartment seemed to lift. The shadows vanished, and the noises stopped. For the first time in months, we felt a sense of peace. Although life returned to normal, I couldn't shake the memory of what we had experienced. Every now and then, I would glance up at the ceiling in Ethan's room, half expecting the handprints to reappear. And whenever I looked out of the bedroom window, I remembered the shadow, its silent, menacing presence. Even now, I wonder if the spirit truly left or if it's still watching, waiting for someone else to notice. The music of shadows. My name is Liam Connors, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, a city nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I've always been a lover of music, particularly the classics from the 70s and 80s. One of my favorite pastimes is listening to Casey Kasem's countdowns on the radio. His voice, combined with the timeless tracks, feels like a nostalgic trip back in time. It was during a long holiday weekend last fall when everything began. My small cabin sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense woods and a long, winding road. That Sunday evening, I tuned in to Casey Kasem's show as I usually did. The warmth of the fireplace, the familiar songs, and the stillness of the forest made for a perfect evening. But as the night deepened, a strange sensation settled over the cabin. It was subtle at first, a faint chill, an unusual heaviness in the air. I dismissed it, thinking it was just my imagination, but that would soon change. As the countdown played, I began to notice oddities. The lights in the cabin flickered briefly, and the crackling fire seemed to dim unnaturally. I heard a faint sound, like footsteps, outside on the wooden porch, thinking it might be a stray animal. I got up to check, but there was nothing there, just the dark forest and the faint hum of the radio inside. Returning to my seat, I felt an unexplainable tension, like someone or something was watching me. The familiar strains of Don't Stop Believin' by Journey were interrupted by a sudden burst of static. My hand froze over the radio dial as I tried to adjust it. The static cleared, and the next song began to play, Every Breath You Take by The Police. The lyrics felt strangely pointed, as though they were directed at me. That night, couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the wooden beams of the cabin ceiling, feeling a persistent unease. At around midnight, something truly bizarre occurred. A wave of energy seemed to move through me, starting at my feet and coursing upward to my head. It wasn't painful, but it was unsettling, like an electrical current. The lamp on the nightstand flickered violently, its light pulsing in time with the sensation in my body. I tried to sit up, but I felt momentarily paralyzed, unable to move or speak. My vision blurred, and I thought I saw faint orbs of light floating near the corners of the room. Just as quickly as it began, the experience ended, leaving me breathless and drenched in sweat. The radio, which I had left on as background noise, suddenly skipped decades in its playlist. Instead of the usual 70s and 80s hits, it began playing My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion, a song from 1998 that had no place in the program. Confused, I checked the radio station details, but everything seemed normal. I was left questioning whether it was a technical glitch or something far stranger. The following days were quiet, but a lingering unease persisted. One afternoon, I decided to reach out to Margaret Green, my neighbor who lived about a mile away. She was an elderly woman who had been a local historian for decades. When I mentioned the odd occurrences, her expression darkened. Margaret told me about the history of my cabin. It had been built in the 1920s by a reclusive musician named Walter Harrington, who was known for his obsession with recording ethereal, otherworldly sounds. Walter disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1935, and locals claimed that his spirit lingered, trying to communicate through music and vibrations. That evening, as I processed Margaret's story, I heard the radio crackle to life again. This time, played an unfamiliar melody, soft, haunting, and melancholic. It wasn't a part of any Casey Kasem countdown I'd ever heard. The melody felt personal, as though it were meant specifically for me. The air grew cold, and the lights dimmed once more. A few nights later, I had a dream so vivid it felt real. I found myself standing in a grand, dimly lit hall. At the center was an antique gramophone, its needle scratching over an old record. The room was filled with shadows, vague figures that watched silently from the corners. One of the figures stepped forward. It was a tall man with gaunt features, dressed in a dark suit from another era. He pointed toward the gramophone, and I heard a voice, soft yet commanding, "Listen carefully. The truth lies within the sound." I woke up gasping, the words echoing in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was more than just a fabrication of my subconscious. Felt like a message. The next evening, the energy in the cabin became almost unbearable. The radio turned on by itself multiple times, always playing songs that felt eerily significant. Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper, Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. Each song seemed to carry a message, though I couldn't decipher it. Then, just past midnight, the lights in the cabin flickered and went out completely. I lit a candle and sat in the living room, the flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick, heavy with an unspoken tension. A sudden, sharp knock came at the door. My heart raced as I opened it, but there was no one there, only the dark expanse of the forest. Desperate for answers, I contacted Dr. Henry Ellsworth, a professor of paranormal studies at the local university. He agreed to visit the cabin and conduct an investigation. Armed with recording equipment and EMF meters, Dr. Ellsworth began his analysis. As the evening progressed, the readings on his devices spiked near the radio. Static filled the room, and faint whispers could be heard through the speakers. At one point, the words "help me" were distinctly audible. Dr. Ellsworth theorized that the energy in the cabin might be a residual imprint of Walter Harrington's spirit, trying to communicate through the medium he loved most, music. To bring closure, Dr. Ellsworth suggested a cleansing ritual. With the help of Margaret, we gathered Walter's old records, found in the cabin's attic, and played them one by one. As the final song, a sorrowful piano piece, played, the room filled with an overwhelming sense of calm. The lights steadied, the air warmed, and the oppressive energy lifted. Though the cabin returned to normal, I couldn't help but feel that a part of Walter remained, watching silently from the shadows. Even now, when I hear certain songs, I'm reminded of those haunting nights. The experience left me with more questions than answers. But one thing is certain: music holds a power far beyond our understanding. The Curse of Green Mart, Shadows Behind the Aisles. My name is Ethan Parker, and I used to work part-time at Green Mart, a small grocery store located on the outskirts of Spokane, Washington. The job was both mundane and chaotic, but over the past year, I had grown accustomed to its rhythm. At first glance, Green Mart appeared to be just another ordinary store, but those who worked there knew something wasn't quite right. Throughout my time there, I had heard whispers from co-workers about mysterious shadows, strange noises from the upstairs room, and an unsettling feeling near the storage area. I never believed those stories, until one fateful night when I became a witness myself. It was an ordinary midweek afternoon. I was assigned to restock the frozen goods section, a task I usually did on quieter days. While arranging boxes in the freezer aisle, I caught a glimpse of a dark shadow darting past the back door of the storage area. The figure moved so quickly that I barely registered it, but it was unmistakable. Curious, I stepped outside to investigate. The storage area behind the freezer was completely enclosed, with heavy pallets blocking every possible exit. There was nowhere for anyone to go. I called my manager, Mr. Hayes, to ask if any staff members were in the area. His response was a firm no, confirming I was the only one working near the freezers that day. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light. Yet the unsettling feeling lingered, following me for the rest of my shift. As the store neared closing time, I was tasked with cleaning the aisles. While mopping near the packaged food section, I noticed a woman. She appeared disoriented, wandering slowly toward me. I greeted her, but she didn't respond. Instead, she abruptly turned left and disappeared into the shelves. Puzzled, I followed her path, but when I reached the spot where she had turned, she was gone. There were no exits nearby, and the aisles were empty. My heart pounded as I realized something was off. I hurried out of the area and avoided looking back. The next morning, I arrived at work to find my coworker, Alex Carter, visibly shaken. He had worked late the night before, overseeing the upstairs audio system that controlled the store's music. Alex recounted a chilling experience while checking the equipment. He saw a young girl sitting on top of the audio console. The girl didn't speak. She simply sat there, staring at Alex with deep, hollow eyes. Terrified, he fled the room without even shutting off the system. When I pressed him for details, he swore he wasn't imagining things and vowed never to go upstairs alone again. Word of our experiences spread quickly among the staff. Other co-workers began sharing their own strange encounters. One person claimed to hear heavy footsteps on the roof late at night, despite the fact that the upstairs area was inaccessible to customers. Another said they saw a shadowy figure dart past the checkout counters during a closing shift. Intrigued, I decided to dig deeper into Green Mart's history. Through a conversation with Mrs. Ruth, an elderly regular customer who had lived in the area for decades, I uncovered a dark story. Decades ago, the land where Green Mart now stood was home to a grand mansion owned by a wealthy family. One fateful night, the mansion was engulfed in flames, trapping the family, a husband, wife, and their young daughter inside. None survived. Mrs. Ruth believed the spirits of the family still lingered on the property, unable to move on. The eerie incidents we experienced could be their way of making their presence known. A week later, I found myself on a late-night shift. Alex had refused to work after dark, leaving me alone to close the store. Everything was quiet until around 11 p.m., when I heard faint footsteps echoing from aisle 7. I called out, but no one responded. Gripping my flashlight, I cautiously approached the aisle. As the beam of light scanned the shelves, it landed on a figure at the far end of the aisle, a woman with long, disheveled hair. She stood motionless, her back turned to me. Before I could react, she vanished into thin air. Suddenly, the store's lights began flickering erratically. The music playing over the speakers distorted into a high-pitched screech, sending chills down my spine. I bolted for the front doors, but the automatic doors refused to open. I was trapped. Turning back, I saw her again, the young girl Alex had described, standing in the center of the store. She raised a hand and pointed toward the checkout area. As I followed her gaze, Everything around me went black. When I regained consciousness, the store was silent. I wasted no time in grabbing my belongings and leaving Green Mart for good. The next day, I submitted my resignation, unwilling to endure another encounter with whatever haunted that place. Alex and I shared our stories with the remaining staff, many of whom admitted they also felt uneasy working there. Over time, more employees left, and Green Mart gained a reputation as a haunted site. Even now, when I drive past the store, I feel a chill run down my spine. The shadows in the aisles, the eerie whispers, and the figures from the past remain etched in my memory. I may have escaped Green Mart, but I know its ghosts still linger, trapped within its walls, waiting for their next visitor. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight, exploring these mysterious and spine-chilling stories. If these tales have sparked your curiosity or left you with unforgettable feelings, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had similar paranormal experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to send your story to the email address provided in the description. Who knows? Your story might become part of our journey into the spiritual world in a future episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting tales. See you in the next episode, and remember, always keep a light by your side.